Begin with item number 2, and that's the adoption of the agenda and AB 361 findings. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Can we please call the
Chairman
vote?
Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer, Director Ratora,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we'll hear public comment on the closed session agenda. Speakers will have 3 minutes. Please state and spell your name before making your presentation. I'm not seeing anybody in attendance right now, so we'll go to the phones. And not seeing anyone on the phones. So with that, we'll adjourn to closed session and we'll return to open at 11 a.m. Board to reconvene, and we'll begin with a report from GA Council on actions taken in closed session.
The board met in closed session to discuss several items concerning real property negotiations and existing litigation as identified in item 4. Report was given to the board. No formal action was taken by the board. That concludes my closed session report.
Thank you, sir. Okay, and next I would like to ask you all to please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And lastly, for item 5, if April, would you please call the roll? Are you there, April? Still can't hear you.
April still shows muted.
She says she has no audio. Let's try.
Okay.
Let me,
I'll just,
if,
yeah, I'll just call the roll.
I can call the roll. if
Okay,
you
yeah,
like.
that'd be great. Thanks, Carol.
Okay, so as she dials back in, let me call the roll. Chairman Peters,
Here.
Director Hayman,
Present.
Director Ratora,
Here.
Director Vallejo,
Present.
and Director Itmeyer.
Here.
Okay, all
Great.
present.
Great, thank you. Okay, our next item is number 6, and that's public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on this agenda, but under the jurisdiction of the board. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Please state and spell your name before making your presentation. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak under public presentations?
Judy Decker. You want me to spell my name? Judiedecker. As you know, I interface with various members of the public frequently, and including going to the facilitation workshop that was on October 4th. Many questions have come up about the finances of this organization, where the money is coming from. Everybody thinks it's solely coming from the Indian Wells Valley Water District, at least as part of the replenishment fee. And people don't know where the money is going, and they're accusing you of various things. I think it would be a great benefit to yourselves, to the agencies you represent, and to the public if you could publish certainly annually, but perhaps quarterly, how much money you take in pumping fees, how much money you take in replenishment fees, and where that money is being spent. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers who would like to speak under public presentations? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move to item number 7, and that's board member comments. And I'll just run through each of the directors. Director Heyman, any board comment?
No comments.
Yeah, Director Rotora?
No comment.
Okay, Director Itmeyer?
No comments.
And Director Vallejo?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I do have one comment. After watching the water board meeting last night, it seems like there are a lot of questions that came up, especially about import water that I feel have been answered in the past. But I would like to ask our manager if you could put a letter or something together that would address some of the concerns that were brought up by the water district last night, and just highlight the answers to that, and that way there's no miscommunication or questions about it in the future.
Yes, sir, be happy to.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll now consider the consent agenda, and that includes item 8A, the approval of the September 14th board minutes, as well as 8B, which is approval of expenditures. Are there any comments from the board on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, are there any members of the public that would like to speak on the consent agenda? Okay. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve consent?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chairman Peters,
Aye?
Vice Chair Heyman,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer,
Aye.
Director Rotora,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, the board will now consider item number 9, which is a resolution authorizing staff to execute a lease agreement with the state of California for monitoring well access. And I believe we're going to hear that from Jeff Helsey.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Chairman and directors and members of the public. What you have before you is a resolution authorizing a lease agreement with the state of California. This lease agreement would give the Groundwater Authority access to 4 existing monitoring wells. These monitoring wells are referred to sometimes as the lumber mill wells. They're located
Lumber mill?
lumber mill.
Yep.
Yep. They're
Yep.
Located northeast of the intersection of Highway 395 and 9 Mile Canyon Road. The groundwater level data from these wells would be used in conjunction with the data that we're going to get from what we've called the Rose Valleys wells, or the monitoring wells that are going to be funded by the Navy COSO funds that were subject of a board action a couple of months ago that will be drilled here in the future. The data from these existing wells and those new wells will be used to estimate the underflow from the Rose Valley area into the Indian Wells Valley Basin. The data we can use in updating our model and updating our groundwater groundwater sustainability plan at the 5-year update. It's a 20-year lease, and lease really all it does is give us access to these wells, and it costs $140 total for the lease. We'd recommend adoption of the resolution. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and Jean Moran is also available, who's been working on this.
Okay, thank you, sir. Are there any questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the public for any comment on this item.
Don Decker, member of the TAC. Jeff went through a list of wells. The most important well that's at the old sawmill site is BR 10, for your information. It's a multi-piezometer well. It's functional. Thank you.
Great, thank you, sir. Are there any other public comments on this item? Okay, seeing none. I'll bring it back to the board for a vote. Is there a motion on this item?
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Can we please have a vote?
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Ratora,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. The board will now hear item number 10, which is a resolution approving an agreement with AVEC for pipeline study and support. And I think that presentation is also going to be from Jeff Helsey.
Actually, this is going to be from the other Jeff Simonetti.
I'm sorry. Thanks, Jeff.
No
Jeff will
worries.
help.
Yep. Good morning, everybody. Jeff Simonetti with the Capital Core Group. So the item before you is a resolution that is pertaining to a deposit request from the Antelope Valley East Kern Water Agency. And just to give a quick bit of background, as you know, in late July, we gave the authorizing resolution for Provost and Pritchard to move forward on the interconnection project and alignment study. That funding came from the money that we received partially from the money from the State Department of Water Resources grant. This item before you particularly pertains to the Antelope Valley East Kern Water Agency has asked us for a deposit request. Provost and Pritchard has reached out to Antelope Valley East Kern Water Agency to get specific information pertaining to not only the existing pipelines, but some of the studies and other information that AVEC has. And there will require some engineering time and staff time for AVEC to be able to deliver the information that Provost and Pritchard needs to complete their interconnection study. So as a result, AVEC is asking for a deposit request of $5,000 to help offset the staff time that would be required to assist us with our interconnection project moving forward. So Provost and Pritchard has mentioned that this is a critical component for them to be able to complete their study. And it's also something that we believe will help show good faith towards AVEC here by moving forward on this deposit request. So that is before you. And again, it's an initial $5,000 deposit and the agreement associated with that. So would be happy to answer any questions that you may have on that.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions on this item from the board? Director Ratora?
Yes, I was reading through the document that we were given. In theory, it says that we're going to approve a data sharing and cost recover agreement. In another place, it also mentions an agreement, and yet there was no agreement in the data package that we received. I'm just curious, is there an existing well, it says attached agreement. It's obviously not attached, but is there a written agreement that is available?
So this is Jeff. That had been, I had sent that along. Yes, that was there with AVEC, and yes, that is available.
Yeah, this is Jeff Helsley. It is available. And the GA's attorneys had reviewed it and were okay with it.
Okay. I guess
We
we're
can
asking,
provide it to the board.
you know, we're being asked to approve a document that's not included in the package. And my specific concerns, and because I don't see it being a big deal, but it doesn't mention in any of the documentation that I have in writing what the cost is, what the schedule is, or what the funding source is. And I'm not willing to just go ahead with a blank check without having some verification that we really know what we're doing. I would have much preferred to have the written document that it was claimed to be attached, but could you answer for me. I believe you said $5,000, but I wasn't sure if it was $5,000 per month. For some reason, your microphone or our speakers and my hearing aids aren't communicating real well. But the total cost, the schedule, and the funding source are what I'm really curious about.
This is Jeff Helsley. This is for an initial deposit of $5,000. The total cost will be based on whatever it is we need AVEX staff to do. At the moment, the consultant provost and Pritchard that the authority hired to do the alignment study has made some specific requests on data on the California feeder and the demands there and some of the other parts of their system. We wouldn't anticipate that the request that they have in now would use up all of the deposit that's being requested from AVEC. So the balance would be available for additional requests as we go through with AVEC and work out implementing this project. The source of funding from this would be from the $7.6 million that was awarded to the Groundwater Authority by Department of Water Resources. This is, this expenditure is for the alignment study, and the alignment study is within the $7.6 million.
Okay, so it's kind of a time and materials type contract that we're expecting to spend, but at this point in time, do we have any order of magnitude estimate on what the total cost is be, or is there a way of limiting our liability at this point in time?
Well, Director, I would suggest, I don't have an idea of the total order of magnitude. Some of the things that would be reimbursed under this, would come much later in the project. When we do start designing a connection, they'll want to review the plans, of course, because we're connecting to their system. It'll be that type of thing that they'll be reviewing. As far as, protection on this, it can.
Mr. Chair, if I may, this is John Vallejo.
Yes, go ahead, Director.
I echo Mr. Ritora's sentiments regarding wanting to approve an agreement that's not attached to the agenda. It sounds like the agreement's been drafted, has been reviewed by staff, and the only real issue is it hasn't been attached to our board agenda. Is it possible that we ask staff to distribute a copy of this draft agreement and that we take this item at the end of the agenda and give us a chance to review? Because it sounds like it's a pretty straightforward agreement, but I agree it would be best if we were able to take a look at this agreement before we actually approve it.
Yeah, thank you, Director. Or depending on the length of this letter, can we just discuss it or have staff read it out? That way we can take the item moving forward.
Jeff, both Jeff Simonetti and Helsley or April, you folks have the agreement. It was attached to the document. You have, I don't have it in front of me. Do you have the agreement?
Yes, I had sent that out with the original request. This is Jeff Simonetti.
Okay, it's only a one or two page agreement. Maybe we just try to run through it.
Will that work for you, Director Ritora?
I quite frankly, I couldn't hear them.
If they have a staff member report on the document and go through it line by line and break it all down right now, it seems like it might have been an oversight that it wasn't attached.
Sure, I'd be fine.
And we can follow up.
I don't want to hold things up. I just don't want to sign a blank check.
Understood.
Yeah. And Director Ritora, we can just follow up with a written copy for you also. But to understand, we will be involved in the coordination between Provost and Pritchard and AVEC staff. So we will see the questions asked and the level of responses. So we will be managing the level of effort. And then we will get invoices. So we have a pretty good judge of the level of questions that are being asked and the level of response required as to how much money this will cost. Be able to put a number on it right now, we don't know because we haven't seen the questions yet, but we will be managing the cost, yes.
This is Jeff Helsley. I have it in front of me if you'd like me to read it to you. It is 2 pages. I could, skip the whereases, and
Yeah,
get to the
if you
meat of it.
could just share the meat of the agreement with the board, and that way we can have a better idea of what that
Certainly,
letter
it's-
contains.
Yes, it's agreement between Antelope Valley East Kern Water Agency, referred to as agency in this agreement, and the Groundwater Authority, referred to as authority. So, number one is the agency, that is AVEC, agrees to review and provide comment on design documents for the project. And B, to provide information and data to assist with design and feasibility assessment of project, including but not limited to existing plans, current and historical system data information, electronic records in the form of shape files or CAD files, water quality data, and other relevant information. Item 2 is the authority, that is the Groundwater Authority, agrees to obtain and comply with all necessary state, local, and other needed regulatory approvals or applicable permits and environmental documents, including without limitation performing all acts required by or in connection with the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act for the construction of the project. B, to ensure that data provided by the agency is used for the intended purpose of the project only and shared only with the consultants actively working on the project on behalf of the authority. C, to provide an upfront deposit with the agency in the amount of $5,000 to be applied toward the actual costs incurred for the project, and thereafter shall make payments to the agency, that is AVEC, in the amounts necessary to fully reimburse AVEC for its costs incurred on the project. Agency's costs shall include all payments made to third-party consultants and the cost per hour of work performed by AVEC employees, including salary and benefits. There's a clause on liability that I would be glad to read if the directors would like to hear it.
I think that pretty much sums up what's in there, if that works for you.
Am I correct that, that Stetson is in the loop between Provost and Pritchard, and that Provost and Pritchard can not be requesting stuff without the knowledge and agreement of Stetson?
That's correct.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board?
This is Director Heyman. I have one question. In the event that it exceeds the $5,000, will it come back before the board to make us aware and approval of further expenditures toward it?
I would think with the agreement is silent on that. It just says that if we need more than 5,000, the Groundwater Authority needs to provide it. But certainly I would think staff could do that, bring it back to you.
I would expect the general manager would come back and for request permission from the board, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Okay, seeing none. Oh,
If there's no public comment, I'll move to approve.
thank you. Let me double check. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak on this item? Okay, anybody on the phones? Okay, not seeing any. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, can we please have a vote?
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Heyman,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Rotora,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is number 11, and that is the approval of letter to AVEC regarding the imported water connection. And I think that's going to be Carol, correct?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in your packet, there is a letter that's been drafted primarily by the folks at Capitol Corps. And this is a revised letter to AVEC, to the AVEC board. And essentially, it's a follow-up to outreach that was made to AVEC several months ago when we first initiated discussions on a connection, imported water connection with that agency. And at that time, staff had recommended that we should probably secure at least some portion of imported water supplies to be able to further those discussions at the board level. And we've made considerable progress since then, and that's what this letter conveys. Basically, it's a follow-up to the board of directors at AVEC, letting them know our status, the progress with the $7.6 million grant, the pipeline alignment study that we've contracted for, the water purchase that's in progress. And so if you agree, we'd like you to review this letter, and if you agree, we would like the board to authorize you, Mr. Chairman, to sign it, and we'll send it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any questions from the board on this item? Director Rotora?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I think there may be a typo on page 2. On the second paragraph of page 2, it says that the GSP was approved in 2021. I think that's what it's saying anyway. And it, or, yeah. Yeah, and I think the correct number is January of 2022 is when it was actually, we received approval from DWR.
I think you're right. Thank you.
Okay, there are two paragraphs I'd like to comment on. One is the first paragraph on page 1, and toward the bottom, it says, we respectfully request a workshop to further discuss with you the progress that we have made and to make a request to potentially collaborate on getting our water supplies delivered to the Indian Wells Valley Basin. That's basically asking to have them to help us with our feasibility studies, and I couldn't agree more. I'm all in favor of that. However, when we go back to the last paragraph on the last page, starting with the second sentence, it says, we also hope that the funding that we have secured, as well as the fees that we have collected through the water replenishment fee, show our commitment to purchase water, build the infrastructure necessary to deliver it, and then pay our fair share towards the ongoing maintenance and associated infrastructure requirements. That's going one step further than what we requested in the first paragraph, and doesn't really add anything to the document. The water district is not committed to build $200 or $300 or $400 million worth of infrastructure, and at this point in time, what our interest is the sustainability of the basin, and to figure out what the real costs are for importing water. So I would respectfully suggest that we delete the second sentence in that paragraph. It doesn't actually lose anything, but I think is more in line anyway with what the water district is interested in terms of, we need to figure out what we're doing, how much it's going to cost, et cetera, more of a feasibility.
Stan, can you repeat the line, page number, paragraph, and line that you're speaking of?
It's on the last page of the letter of intent under our request. The actual, it's the third sentence, this is really our request, is we are asking for your consideration of a workshop to discuss the following topics, and that's fine. All of those topics are reasonable topics, and they're things that we need to address. However, the second sentence in the paragraph entitled our request commits us to something that the water district is not ready to commit to.
Okay. We have a slide up here right now about imported water costs. Could I ask Mr. Phil Hall to come and share some background on that?
morning, I think, still, directors.
Just barely.
The slide that you see here, was presented to the TAC, I believe also the PAC, but this is definitely taken out of the TAC from 2019. It's currently on the GA's website. We've been working on these numbers since early 2019, and they show our anticipated costs based on only getting half of the capital costs for the infrastructure in grant fees. As this board's aware, we have adequately funded our initial design phase. That's the finding our specific points and means of where the pipeline is going to be at $7.6 million grant from the state. So we're past half capital costs so far. We're at 100% capital costs, and we've got beliefs that we're going to get quite a bit more. So I think half is probably low, but these costs are out there. The Water District has seen those. The Water District commented on those. Anybody who wants, they can go to the September TAC meeting and see that. At the Water District's meeting last night, multiple directors seemed to indicate they've never seen these numbers, which is sort of shocking and dismaying because they're out there. They have a member on the TAC. They're right there. And the other part of it, which is sort of troubling, is nobody has presented any sustainability plan for this basin that doesn't include imported water. Nobody. Even the white paper that we hear about, it includes import project. The real difference between the white paper and the GSP is the white paper mined this basin storage for multiple years, multiple thousands, tens of thousands of acre foot of water to grow some trees, really. That's the main difference. And that storage issue between the white paper and the GSP is talked about in DWR's approval, where DWR's approval essentially says that we used conservative estimates on what the basin storage was to come to our conclusions. But this is the cost of an import project. Nobody has ever shown us a sustainability plan for this basin that doesn't ultimately rely on an import project. And these numbers have been out and well-known for, well, 3 years. So I think that about sums it up.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. So does that answer?
I'd like to thank the county for their input. I represent the Water District. And if you want the Water District to go along with this letter of intent, you will delete that second sentence in that program.
Understood. Thank you, Director Atora. Are there any other questions from the board?
I don't have a question, I just have a statement, but, so this is a letter from the Groundwater Authority to AVAC, not from the Water District to AVAC. So, Water District sure has an option to not agree with it, but this is not the Water District.
Thank you, Director Heyman. Any other comments from the board?
Yeah, I mean, this is John Vallejo. If I recall correctly, I'm pretty sure it's the official position of this agency that the statement made in that sentence is correct. If the other board members have a different recollection about what the intent of this agency is, I'd like to hear that. That would be news to me. But absent that, I think this sentence is accurate with respect to this agency. Obviously, the Water District has other issues or concerns, but this is a letter from this agency expressing this agency's intent, not expressing the Water District's intent. So I would leave it in, is I guess my ultimate position on that specific request.
Great. Thank you, Director Vallejo. Any other comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to public comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, can we please have a vote?
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Heyman,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Ratora,
No.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. We will now hear item number 12, and that is a resolution approving Urban Community Drought Relief Program application. And I'll turn it back over to Jeff for that.
Actually, directors, this will be Michael McKinney who will be giving this presentation from Capital Corps. Good afternoon. In your last month's packet, we had explained that we had identified the urban community drought relief program at DWR as a potential source of funding for the $5.3 million water recycling plant, as well as a potential secondary application for the well mitigation and rehabilitation program. Stetson, Carroll, and Capital Corps successfully held a scoping meeting with DWR and received preliminary eligibility from DWR for our application. They indicated that they would like to see a regional plan, meaning that any and all applications for the region would be presented at once, but they would be considered as individual and prepared as individual applications. Before you is a resolution basically approving for Stetson to develop those applications, the first one being $5.3 million for planning activities associated with a water recycling plant. And the second is to develop a well mitigation and rehabilitation program that fits the eligibility criteria. The DWR grant is not available to retrofit or to fix private wells. It is available, however, to take wells that have failed as a result of the water supply situation and consolidate them into a public system. So it would not be an augment of the existing well mitigation and rehabilitation plan that the authority has. It would be in addition to that, which Stetson can discuss with you. The budget application is there below that in the final area of that, and we request your approval, and I'll answer any questions if you have them.
Okay.
Steve, this is John Vallejo. Can you just repeat what it is aimed at?
It's which part, Director Vallejo? The well mitigation?
Yeah.
So the well mitigation program essentially is broken up into two parts at the state of California. Private well owners can seek mitigation and rehabilitation through Cal OES, which is directly from the state through emergency drought funding, or it can do it through self-help incorporated and other nonprofits that are out there. DWR uses these funds specifically to say that if it is a public well that is failing, they can be rehabilitated, or it can be used to consolidate private wells that have failed as a result of water supply into a public system.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
This is obviously very pertinent to issues that we're dealing with. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Chairman Peters,
Yes, sir.
this is Steve. I just wanted to add a couple of small things to it. One is that addressing the potential for mitigation of a private well that has water supply problems, as we've discussed, shallow well impacts. In our program, in our shallow well mitigation program, we've included evaluation of regional impacts and potential solutions, including connecting to another well or connecting to a public water system. So that's already a part of the program, as Michael McKinney pointed out. It's already part of our program. Funding for it, though, is not there. This is for funding, and as far as the difference between a private well, individual private well, and we're looking at multiple private wells right now that have been impacted. That'll be coming up a little bit later. And what this program does is this program helps fund a solution if the solution involves hooking up to a public system. For example, the Indian Wells Valley Water District. If there is a solution that brings these customers off of their private wells and onto the public water system, there's funding for that. That's what this funding is for. The water district is already looking at a couple of small water systems for consolidation. There may be others. And I wanted to point out that as part of this application, we will need to identify in our application what the programs are we are looking at, what wells, where the areas are that we are going to be looking at for potential consolidation. We did have a discussion with the water district, with Don and Jim, about what the water district is doing, what this program does. Capital Corps was on it to explain it all. I think between the groundwater authority and the water district staff, I think we're on the same. I believe we're on the same page about what we want to do, and the application will include at least a reconnaissance level look at where we are looking at potential consolidation to public water systems, the water district being one. If we are unable to put together what we believe to be a satisfactory application with bona fide projects that we feel confident to submit for funding, then we won't proceed any further. But we don't know until we look at this, and that'll be part of the application process. We've indicated a budget in here. Typically, these applications for state funds run about $25,000 each. Our feeling is doing them both together, we can cut that down. I think the budget is either 40 or 45,000. I don't have the staff report in front of me, but that's the plan, is to put together a program or a reconnaissance level program for potential projects with the water district and make it part of the application to the state. Assuming that there are potential viable projects. And as I mentioned, the water district is already looking at a couple of consolidations that may or may not be a part of this. We don't know yet until we start looking at it and coordinate with the water district.
Okay, thank you.
Directors, let me add two things that have come out as of October the 10th. The deadline for application is now been set at January 31st, 2023 for the applications. And there is now a added item that says projects must demonstrate a matching share requirement of 25% or greater. For both projects at about, for the water recycling plant 5.3, that is a 1.325 million matching share requirement for the grant that will have to be garnered from other sources and may be garnered from federal sources, including the BOR, the Bureau of Reclamation, Title 16 that we are looking at right now.
Yep. And this, the recycle is all for the advanced treatment, not what the city's doing. We're taking it from what the city does. This is money for advanced treatment.
Okay.
I do want to point out this is not duplicative of what Stetson is doing in terms of the feasibility study for the Bureau of Reclamation. That feasibility study is for the entire water recycling plant. This 5.3 million would be specific to planning funds. We would then shift our focus to construction funds under Title 16 if we needed to.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McKinney and Mr. Johnson. Are there any questions from the board on this item? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Can we have a vote?
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Rotora,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, the board will now hear item number 13, which is the Shallow Well Impact Mitigation Program update. And I believe Heather is from Stetson is going to be doing the presentation on that one.
That's correct.
Yes.
We got Heather.
Yes,
Great.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. The intent of this presentation is to update the board and the public on the Shallow Well Mitigation Program status. To provide some background, DRI, the Desert Research Institute, first developed the groundwater model that was used for this basin in 2016. That model built upon several significant previous modeling efforts, and the model then was further reviewed and calibrated during the GSP development process. This model then was used to conduct a shallow well analysis, This was included in the final approved GSP. The analysis evaluates potential impacts to shallow wells caused exclusively by declining groundwater levels. It did not look at impacts caused by other effects, including water quality. In that analysis, 872 wells were estimated to be shallow, which includes an estimate of 832 private domestic wells. So now for the worst case scenario, the baseline analysis that represents no management actions implemented by the board. This graph on the right shows estimated impacts to shallow wells under these baseline conditions. There are two axes on this graph. So the left axis shows the number of impacted wells, and that's represented by the blue bars. So you can see the distribution of the impacted wells over time. And the right axis, represented by the gold line, shows the cumulative number of impacted wells.
Sorry to
So by
interrupt. It appears that what's on the screen for the public and for me at least is not the graph you're speaking to. I think we need to switch the slide.
Sorry.
Okay, I am on slide 3. I apologize for that. That shows worst case scenario.
There you go.
Graph.
There we go.
Yeah, this is it.
Okay. You have it up now?
Yeah, I think we're good if you would like to proceed.
Okay, perfect. So the left axis, I'll just repeat this so you can see it. The left axis shows the number of impacted wells. That's the blue bar distribution. You can see the distribution of impacted wells over time under these baseline conditions. And the right axis, represented by the gold line, shows the cumulative number of impacted wells. So by 2030, it's estimated approximately 10% of the shallow wells would be impacted. By 2040, that increases to about 25%. And essentially, by 2060, we're looking at almost all the impacted, almost all the shallow wells are impacted by declining groundwater levels. If you can go to the next slide, this graph can be interpreted the same way with those two axes. And this now graph shows the estimated impact to shallow wells under our GSP management scenario. So that means that our GSP programs and management actions and projects are all implemented under this scenario. And with under these conditions, 22 wells, approximately 2.5%, were impacted by 2035, are estimated to be impacted. Now, those number of wells that form the basis of our shallow well mitigation program. Go to the next slide, please. This shallow well mitigation program is discussed in the GSP. And under this, the pumping currently that we're seeing is generally following the predictions that we modeled and estimated. We do have, for example, the transient pool and other programs in place. The program did anticipate approximately 116,000 acre feet of groundwater storage would be mined and pumped from the basin before imported water would be delivered, before sustainability is reached. But now, one notable exception with these predictions is that Mojave Pistachios was not predicted to continue pumping in that manner that it has been currently. And Mojave Pistachios has not been paying any of these mitigation fees to offset these impacts. Based on Mojave Pistachios' self-reporting to the GA of their groundwater production, an additional approximately 5,600 acre feet of groundwater has been removed from the basin storage during the period from January 2021 to July 2022, during that 19-month period. That's unallotted groundwater that has been removed. You go to the next page or next slide, please. There are two applications currently that have been submitted to the GA. One is what we refer to as Stark Street, and the location of that is east of Ridgecrest. That well stopped producing water in June of 2022. So we are coordinating with their representatives and an organization called Self-Help to discuss mitigation options and their application and what information the Water Resources Manager needs. So self-help it's an organization that's received substantial state grant funds to implement shallow well mitigation programs throughout the state. The second application is from Heritage Village Master Community Association. Kind of the same timeline as the other one. Their well stopped producing in spring of 2022. So for both of these applications, the Water Resources Manager is evaluating what has been submitted to us, and after that evaluation is complete, we'll make recommendations to the board for what mitigation, if any, is warranted. And just to note, we do have well driller quotations to mitigate both of these wells, and those are currently at $100,000 each. Next slide. There are potentially other impacted wells in the basin that have not submitted formal applications to our shallow well mitigation program. Kern County records do show 19 new production wells have been drilled since the GSP was adopted in January of 2020. So Stetson and the Water Resources Manager is currently investigating these wells to understand why they were drilled and the reasoning. There have also been 10 wells in the basin that have been reported to DWR as dry as of September of this year. We've seen 10 reported to them. So we do suspect there are additional wells that potentially have not been reported to either DWR or the GA as well. So when we have these evaluations complete, we will be providing recommendations to the board. This concludes the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Are there any questions from the board on this item?
Chairman Peters, this is Steve. I would just like to just quick point out one thing. Great presentation, April. Great job. Thank you. She pointed out that we have quotations to replace shallow private domestic wells at $100,000 each. In our program, we estimated $75,000. It was several years ago, and obviously prices have gone up, well drilling costs have gone up, but it's still very close. At $100,000, it's in the realm of our original estimate of $75,000.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah.
Are there any comments from the board?
Yes, according to the brief, there were 2 wells that have now put in applications. One of the things that came out very loud and clear during the discussion of the mitigation plan is that the timing associated with the mitigation was critical. And I just want to make sure that we are on board to do or to meet our commitment regarding the mitigation effort. I don't remember what the timing was, but it seems to me we're like 30 or 60 days, something like that. We were supposed to be able to do something to help these people. Can you give us a feel for where we are regarding our support for the people who have applied for help?
I can help with that, Director Rotora. Yes, there are timelines, and there's 2 programs. One is the emergency mitigation. Neither one are going under emergency. Those are providing either technical help or emergency water supplies. We have timelines there. We're not involved in that right now with either one. The second one involves an evaluation and solution to the problem. The timelines, according to the program, which is appropriate, the timelines don't technically get started until all information is submitted. The key component we haven't gotten yet, and we're working with these folks, is the independent evaluation from the well driller or well contractor, an independent evaluation of the cause of the failure. We need that in order to do our evaluation, because obviously we're not out there. We can't go look at it. We need that information. So we are watching those timelines, and we are trying to complete our collection of the information we need to do our staff report. As soon as we do collect the information, we will notify obviously our GA staff and the applicant that we have enough information to do the staff report, and that starts the timeline.
Thank you. Do you have any idea what these two wells are doing in terms of getting water at the current time?
We do, and Jeff, we have people on who have better information than me right now. For the Heritage well, it is an irrigation well. I believe they're getting water from the water district right now. And the other well, I am not sure what Stark is doing, but they do have water. Jeff, do you know what Stark is doing, or is Maya on?
Yeah, this is Jeff. Yeah, the Stark Street well, a self-help organization is providing water to them, bottled water for drinking, trucked water in there, so that they do have water while the solution's being worked out for their long-term supply.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments from the board?
I do.
Okay, Mr.
Is this the same program that the board voted on 6 months ago to withhold funding on, to be able to provide as much money towards the purchasing of water rights?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't catch the first part of that.
Okay. I was asking, is this the same program, the support program for the public that the board took action on to basically, there wasn't a dedicated funding source for, I hope I'm making sense, and I believe the water district had an objection to funding it because they wanted all the money to go towards the purchasing of water rights. Is this the same program?
The replenishment
The
fee.
replenishment fee actually is two different fees. One is for the replenishment fee, and the other is the shallow well mitigation fee. And it isn't a big number coming out of the replenishment fee, but I believe that number has been building up for some time now. So I suspect there's probably money there for this. Certainly our general manager could correct me if I'm wrong.
Mr. Hall, would you like to share a couple thoughts on that?
Sure. Good afternoon at this stage. The Shallow Well Mitigation Fund is funded through the replenishment fee, which includes two components, an augmentation, which can be used for imported water, recycled water, anything that's really going to augment this basin. And the other is the shallow well mitigation to pay for these damages that we're going to anticipate as we keep overdrafting this basin 116,000 acre foot. That fee, the mitigation component, is paid in part by those that pay the replenishment fee and also by those that they're in the transient pool because they're overdrafting. So they actually have to pay that part too. So it's coming from 116,000 acre foot of overdraft times 1750. I do not believe right now, Carol would have to correct me, if we have enough money to pay for $200,000 of well damages, which means we will be borrowing from the augmentation fund to meet our obligation on this fund, which will then be, of course, funded back as we collect over a longer period of time. That was always anticipated because, as you saw from the graph, the damages are front-loaded, but we're still collecting money on that part of the fee for a while back. So it's funded. It's been in the program since the replenishment fee was adopted and the transient pool. It's just going to be one of those fees that catches up to itself.
Thank you.
Could the general manager tell us how much money is in that fund at this point in time?
I can tell you that for this year, there was 101,000 collected. I was looking to see if we have a cumulative total in our financial statements, but I don't have that handy.
Okay.
Not broken out by the specific fund.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Okay, are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this item?
Judy Decker. It is my observation that there are quite a few new houses being built in the county that would require connection to either a co-op or their own private domestic well. And I don't quite understand that issue with regards to the county permitting that and the zone changing and the water problems that we have in this valley.
Thank you. Are there any other public speakers?
Don Decker. I have a comment in regards to well failure, and I have pointed this out as a TAC member many times now. The present definition and the calculations that led to the slides that you've looked at are based upon a well failure that is basically absence of water. There's another failure which is happens first. It is the pump intake is set at some point where the well is being serviced. The pump is reset deeper where the pump intake is in the perforation zone, and now the pump has access to the fines in the aquifer that lead to sanding. It may well be the problem that the Heritage Village well has got. And it's an additional complication, and it, as it turns out, looking at the point of time when the wells that exist have been drilled, many of them actually have their intakes in the perf zone and are likely pumping some level of sand and other debris. I'm pointing this out as a well owner and as a concerned citizen. The money that's available in this program is relatively small as it presently exists, but in fact, you may be facing a considerably greater well failure mode that will show its ugly head in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you.
If not now.
Are there any members of the public additionally that would like to speak on this item? Okay. I'm not seeing any. I believe this item's just a receive and file, correct? Okay, great.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so the board will now hear item number 14, which is the review and adoption of the calendar year 2023 budget. And I'll turn it over to Carol.
So I have a few slides to review it, and before I do that, I'll just give you a few highlights. We have proposed the budget for 2023. We're bringing it to you in October so we can comply with the provisions of the Joint Exercise of Powers Agreement, which states that we'll have the budget approved 60 days prior to the start of the new year. So,
Pardon me, could I get you to speak into your microphone, please?
I'm sorry, absolutely. Anyway, we're bringing it to you in October so that we can be in compliance with our Joint Exercise of Powers Agreement to make sure our timing is correct. Just some key points and assumptions as we go through it. The total proposed budget includes projected expenditures from all funds that total approximately $4.89 million. Total revenues are projected at $7.57 million. And this reflects an increase of our proposed expenditures of about $1 million and an increase in revenues of about $2 million over the current year budget. The anticipated revenue and expense of $2 million is associated with the money in and out for the Sigma IP grant that we anticipate spending in and receiving in 2023. And we also have some projected decrease in operating and legal expense. The extraction fee expenses total $1.89 million and will require an interfund transfer of approximately $368,000 to balance the budget. We are also expecting a grant retention payment of approximately $204,000 to help us with the extraction fee. You'll see a new revenue and expense column added for the Navy COSO royalty revenues and expenses that we expect this year, or excuse me, in 2023. Legal fees relating to pending litigation that are not our general counsel services are again allocated to the augmentation portion of the replenishment fee. Again, administration costs are split equally between extraction and replenishment fees, which is what's been done the previous years. We again have a placeholder amounts for our consultant contracts, both administration, RGS, and Capital Core. We've used generally the 2022 levels, but again, those are subject to approval when we bring those contracts back to you around the end of the year, December, and we'll adjust the budget accordingly based on your approval. We do want to point out that in 2022, we will be completing repayment of the Kern County advance agreement of $500,000. The final payment will be made in December. And in 2023, we'll begin budgeting for repayment to the city of Ridgecrest. So we have $500,000 budgeted to begin repaying the city for its in-kind services that have been accumulating. So just to look at the budget, just to give you some detail, here is the revenue, $7.57 million, and you can see where we have $1.3 million in the extraction fee, excuse me, 3.9 anticipated to be collected in the augmentation portion of the replenishment fee, $125,000 to be collected for shallow well mitigation, excuse me. Under DWR grants, we're expecting that $204,000 retention payment to be received sometime next year, as well as anticipating that we will be reimbursed $2 million projected for work that will be completed against the $7.6 million grant. And then we have some money budgeted and with a separate accounting for the Navy COSO fund. Let's see. I think this is just a detail of the revenue less the grant funds. So this is what we'll be collecting through the fees. A total of $5.35 million. And here's some detail on our total expenses, $4.89 million, and they are allocated by revenue allocation or by fund. Pointing out that we did not include beginning balances here in this slide because we are waiting for audited figures. So we'll make those adjustments once we have them from the audit. This identifies the revenue we expect to receive from the state. Again, $2 million reimbursed from the grant, and another $204,000 as the retention payment. This is a summary of outstanding obligations, and as I As I explained, the Kern County loan will be repaid and completed as of this year. So we're going to be able to remove that, and then we will begin budgeting to repay the city of Ridgecrest. And we do show the interfund loan that we are expecting between the replenishment or augmentation fee to the extraction fund, $367,814. And then this just shows the anticipated repayment to the city in 2023. There's a sheet in there that shows the budget balanced, basically showing those interfund transfers to balance all of the columns. And that's just additional detail on those various items. And so there we have total expenses on the extraction fee will be just under 1.9 million. For the augmentation fund, 1.286, looking at potentially 70,000 for shallow well mitigation, 2.2 million on the DWR grant, and 15,000 on the Navy Coastal Fund. I'm happy to answer any questions, and hope you will entertain adoption of the proposed budget.
Great, thank you, Carol. I do have a couple questions. Going back to the audit, are we still on track, as far as you know, to have that by the November meeting?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. And then I actually had a question for Judy Decker. I know, Judy, that you had mentioned earlier in the meeting about wanting to see kind of a breakdown, maybe quarterly, of just a snapshot of revenues and expenses. And I think on the second slide, they had just a real 30,000-foot overview of the beginning and ending balances. Is it something like that what you would like to see included going forward?
Quite frankly, I couldn't read it, and I didn't have time to read the board package. But it needs to be, yes, it needs to be a summary. It needs to be simple so that members of the public, especially those people who are always criticizing you, can look at it and see where the money that they're paying is going in a summary.
Great.
Because I have heard things like the replenishment fee is being used to develop the GSP and other plans, which it is not. And, you know, I'm a member of the PAC along with David, and he's going to talk to you in a minute. But communication here is the key. And I don't know how the heck you do communicate with people today, because apparently not that many people get the papers. Not that many people read the papers on their computer. And many people get their so-called news on social media in the way of gossip.
Understood. And Ms. Decker, your points are well taken, but because it's not, we're kind of getting off topic on this issue, but I'd be happy to talk with you more about it offline.
But you know, we were in a terrible inflation spiral going up here, and so people are more cognizant of where their money goes. And helping them to see where the money they spend as a water district customer goes for this organization will be very helpful to them and to you.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think that's all the questions I have. Are there any other questions from the board?
Yes, I appreciate the desire to conform with the JPA. Water District has not had time to review the document, and so we will not be voting to approve it today. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other members of the board that would like to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, are there any members of the public that would like to make comments on this item, number 14? Okay, seeing none, we will bring it back to the board for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. We actually had somebody just call in on the phone, so before we take a vote, let's see if we can get this caller in. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, this is Renee Westerlusk. I just wanted to know that loan to the extraction fund, that transfer. I just wanted to know what that's about again. Maybe you've covered it in past meetings, but I just don't understand it.
Okay, thank you, caller. We'll try and get you an answer to that.
Okay.
Would you like me to respond?
Yes, please.
So Renee, what we do is the money that we collect in the extraction fee is a little short to cover all of the required expenditures that would normally fall under that fee. And that would include administration, general counsel, and all of our basin management activities. They're all itemized in our budget here. And so what we've done here for the second year is an interfund transfer. We just borrow the shortfall from the augmentation fund and transfer it to the extraction fund just for the purposes of balancing the budget and being able to make those payments meet our needs under that fee. Now, if the money is not needed, if we end up not using as much in those items, then the money is not transferred. It stays there in the augmentation fund. But it's also tracked with repayment plans for the future as feasible.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Are there any other questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Ratora,
No.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Our next item is number 15, and that is a report from our water resource manager. And so I will turn it over to Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman Peters. As usual, we'll walk through. It's a little shorter than before, but we still have quite a few items. We'll walk through our update reports. We've got staff. We got Myra, Jeff, Jean here to do the reports. We'll get through our update reports and then take questions when we're done. So if Jeff and Myra, you're ready, we're ready to get started with the grant funding, Prop 1 and Prop 68.
Hi, so getting started with the Prop 1 status update, there's two ongoing invoices. Invoice 14A, that one has a total retention payment of $64,941.88. That one is still under review. We have not received any comments since the submission date back in the end of May, so we're still waiting on that. Invoice 15A, that one has a total repayment payment after retention of $17,532.41. That's still under DWR review. That was submitted back at the end of last month, and so we're still waiting on that one. Going on to the next slide for Prop 68. That one has still two ongoing. Invoice 14B. That one has been approved. That one has a total requested payment after retention of $1,885.36. And invoice 15B, that one has a total requested payment after retention of $21,932.48. That is still currently under a DWR review, also submitted at the end of last month. And on to the next slide, for the Prop 1 and Prop 68, Recently, the draft grant completion report was submitted at the beginning of this month on October 2nd. And going forward, there is 2 deliverables due at the end of this month and 1 progress report due at the end of next month. Currently, we are trying to schedule a meeting with our DWR grant manager to go over some details regarding the grant closeout and amongst other things. So, moving on to the next slide, Bianca, I think you can take it from here.
Hi, yes, this is Bianca at Stetson. I'll be presenting the Sigma Implementation Grant Status Update. So as required by the Sigma Implementation Grant, DWR grant submissions include the Environmental Information Form, Draft Deliverable Schedule, Mileage Start and Endpoints, and Rate Schedules, which has already been provided to DWR. We will provide the first progress report and invoice to DWR by November 31st, 2022. Task 1 of the grant is the Imported Water Pipeline Alignment Study. Since the last board meeting, Provost and Pritchard, the consultants for the study, have completed the October monthly progress meeting on October 3rd, 2022, a second field trip on September 23, 2022. They have requested data from AVEC regarding the California City feeder, and they have developed 11 preliminary alignments. Next slide, please. Next steps for Provost and Pritchard include screening the 11 preliminary alignments based on constructability and encroachment into federal lands. This includes U.S. Department of the Interior Bureau of Land Management, or BLM land, and the U.S. Department of the Interior Fish and Wildlife Service protected areas. Provost and Pritchard anticipates presenting 3 possible alignments to the TAC late October or early November. Provost and Pritchard continues ongoing coordination with Capital Corps / AVEC on the data sharing and cost sharing agreement. And lastly, Provost and Pritchard are expecting to submit Task 1 through 3 tech memo deliverables in the month of October. Thank you.
This is Chairman Peters, this is Steve again. Thank you, Bianca and Myra. Great reports. 2 quick items. One, to let those folks know, I know Don Decker's there, that we are putting together a package to send out to the TAC with 3 items on it. Jean Moran has provided her recommendations to me, and I'm putting the package together. So the TAC is going to re-engage. So that's one. The other one is, as part of Myra's report on the final completion report for Prop 1, Prop 68. For those of you who have been here from the beginning, when we actually made our first application for grant funding and we got the 1.1 or 1.6 million, I mean, that was a major event to get that funding, to get this groundwater authority moving. And the idea now that we are actually writing the final grant completion report, Heather Steele wrote it and it's been submitted as a draft. The way DWR works is they ask for the completion report well before the end of the grant agreement deadline, the completion of the grant, so that they can review the draft and make sure that when we get to the end of it, their comments have been included and we'll finalize that final report on the grant agreement. So huge steps on implementing and completing the first big grant that the Groundwater Authority received. But with that, we'll move on to GSP implementation projects. I think the recycled water program, I think Jeff's going to do this.
Yes, we've got 2 components to our recycled water program at the moment. One of them is the recycled water alternatives analysis, and the other is the Title 16 feasibility study. First, talking about the recycled water alternatives analysis, just to remind everybody, that analysis has been underway for a while now. The conclusion of the preferred alternative is an advanced treatment and injection project where we treat the water and inject it into the basin. Our latest work is we prepared a draft evaluation of a potential injection well that we can use. The Water District had actually done a look at an advanced treatment and injection project. I think it was after the GSP was put out and suggested it. The Water District looked at it and they suggested one of their wells that's used as a monitoring well right now might be suitable. We've done an evaluation of it using the regulatory guidelines about what's needed to operate an injection well. We're doing some internal review on that, and then we'll give it out to our technical team, which includes the Water District's engineer and the city's consultant on their wastewater treatment plant design and construction. We've also started looking at how to dispose of the brine that's generated from the advanced treatment process. One of the main reasons we want to look at that is the land requirement for it. We want to look in some of our next steps, look at all the treatment in more detail to get a footprint for the treatment, then start looking at sites that we need. There's been some ongoing coordination with Capital Corps on potential funding opportunities. We anticipate having the final tech memo on our alternative study here by the end of the year, hopefully sooner than that. We were talking about that just yesterday. We can go to the next slide. So under the Bureau of Reclamation Title 16 feasibility study, the board authorized us to prepare that study back in July at a special meeting. As I'd mentioned, we were going to bring on Trussell Technologies, who are a treatment specialist and permitting specialist for recycled water, to work with us on the advanced treatment technology. We had a meeting with them on September 22nd, talking about the scope and the approach for this project. We've been providing them with additional information since then. We've developed a draft outline of the feasibility study and have actually began drafting some of the text that goes into that. And we're planning on having that study done by the end of this year too. And that's what we have on the recycled water.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
Great, Jeff, thanks. I think our last item is really updates on some of the projects that are ongoing. Jean Moran is leading most of those, and I think Jean is still on. She was on before, so we're great to have Jean on board. Jean, are you there and ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the board and members of the public. The next three slides are a summary of the work that's ongoing and that was completed during this last month since your last board meeting. For data collection and monitoring update, last week was when KCWA and Stetson went out to measure groundwater levels, and that took place between October 3rd and 6th. Currently, we have 162 monitoring sites currently in the program. We were able to measure at 157 wells last week. After I'm getting some feedback from someone, but anyway, the initial data was also collected from 3 GDE, that's groundwater dependent ecosystems monitoring wells. I've been reporting on those through the last number of board meetings. The groundwater dependent monitoring program now has started. So this is the first data collection. We will look at that data over the next couple of weeks to see if we need to make any adjustments in that monitoring program. Once the data is reviewed, it'll be posted on the data management system, which is iwvgsp.com. There's a picture of it over to the right. This is the database that got developed with Prop 1 funding for the GSP, and we continue to post updates to data and other, not just water level data, other new data that we get either at the stream gauging stations, and recently we put on new faulting that was mapped by the USGS and published. It will also be posted to the SIGMA website. This needs the data from the water levels we just collected needs to be posted by the end of December. Last week, we went out and did equipment maintenance and checking of equipment at the stream gauges and the precip stations. The fall 2022 water quality sampling was also done last week. We had a total of 4 people in the field. We took water samples from 12 monitoring wells, plus 5 domestic wells, plus a study that we're doing on El Paso sub-area monitoring wells. We are looking at the water quality in El Paso and comparing it to the water quality to in the main part of Indian Wells Valley Basin. That work was completed last week, and we will probably get water quality results from the lab in 2 to 3 weeks, and then after that we will analyze the data, and that becomes part of Water Year 2023 report. In addition, during the last month, we have worked on the Navy real estate access agreements. This is cadastral mapping for putting telemetry at 5 Navy monitoring wells. This is part of the GSP key wells. It's also posted on the DMS. It's a different tab that I'm showing you right here, but where it focuses just on the key wells for water management within the basin. Next slide. We are continuing to work on the GSP model configuration management plan within those guidelines. On October 6th, last week, we had an in-person meeting in Ridgecrest at the City Hall. And we had water resource managers, so Stetson staff, the Navy, Desert Research Institute staff, and 2 members of the TAC that are part of the technical modeling group at this meeting. That we discussed the configuration items. It's part of the process of reviewing new data. It gets on a configuration items list. We review where we're at with it, what the timeline is for reviewing these data. And then we had a presentation by DRI on proposed model updates. We're discussing what changes, how we will use new data for model updates for the 5-year report. In addition, we're planning a field trip to the Navy base. We've been working with Navy personnel for getting badging and access to different locations on the Navy base. That field trip will be on October 30th. We're going to be looking at the new USGS fault data from the 2019 earthquake. We're looking at playa evaporation, groundwater-dependent ecosystem sites, and we're discussing the model structure on that field trip. The timeline for the model, the working on the model, is 2022. This year was about reviewing new technical data and reports, and then development of recommendations and costs to the GA board for work to be done next year. So 2023 would be updating the model with GA approved revisions. And then once the model is updated and recalibrated, 2024 would be modeling scenarios for the 5-year GSP report. So we're putting ourselves on a timeline for supporting the 5-year GSP report. Next slide. Sometimes there's confusion with when we call our project the Rose Valley Wells. It's really These wells are subflow from Rose Valley. These wells would be in Indian Wells Valley. And they are to validate or to get a better understanding of what is that subflow that comes from Rose Valley into the groundwater basin of Indian Wells Valley. The plan is, from discussions with the Navy, is that November 9th, the November 9th GA board meeting, we will have an agreement we will present an agreement for the board to review and approve. This is the $300,000 for drilling these 2 wells. The monitoring while drilling and construction is planned. It's still planned for late fall, winter of 2022. In addition with this area is, you had it as an earlier agenda item, is the California State Lands Commission lease agreement. The former sawmill wells are on this map. They're the red dots that are close to, Don Becker brought up USBR 10. That's the well furthest south along 395. It's the green dot on the map. Then the 2 new wells that we are drilling would be the 2 yellow wells that are closer to Little Lake. They're probably about halfway between Little Lake and USBR 10, but you can see their distribution just to the east of 395. And that, as we move forward, that information will also be presented to you as we find out more about these wells. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from the board on the Water Resource Manager's report? Dr. Artora?
Yes. I think it's working. I have 2 general questions. The first one goes back to one of my old standby questions, is at one point in time we were told that Stetson would be providing the TAC a new methodology for measuring the change to groundwater and storage by the end of summer. My understanding is that didn't happen. Can you give us a update on, has that happened to date, or if it hasn't, when is it going to happen?
Go ahead, Jean.
I will take that. I'll take the question. So we did update that with that we would be giving, it will be part of the Water Year 2022 annual report, and that a draft would be going out on November 15th. And I either presented it last month or the month before. We are still online for that. In addition, the methodology is, because we have an active technical model group, that is being planned for a meeting with that group to review the methodology and to get input on that methodology before it goes into the annual report. We are meeting in the field on the 20th, and it would be the week after in our meeting that we will be presenting that. So it is underway, and that method, and that's where the status is.
I guess I'd like some clarification on just one point. Is the methodology review going to go to the TAC before the report comes out, or is the TAC going to see it at the same time as everybody else in November?
The November 15th, Heather, you might remember the timeline better than I am, it will go to the GA staff and the TAC on November 15th to review concurrently. the report itself is not. That's correct. Okay, and the report itself is not due until April 1st. So we're making sure that there's time for review and discussion on this.
Okay, thank you. My second general question is, there were 19 corrective actions that came out of the DWR review of GSP. Can you give us a feel for how many of those 19 corrective actions have been completed at this date?
Jeff's on also. I know we're working on multiple at this time, Director Vittor. I don't have a status report on where they're at. Our goal is certainly to meet the DWR requirements on their approval of the GSP. So we are working on those. I don't know where we're at on them. And there were 19 items that you suggest, but that is not the number of actual numbered corrective actions. We're addressing them based on the DWR approval letter, which identified, I think, 7. And that's the way we're approaching it.
Yeah, this is Jeff. I would just add that, the corrective actions be reflected in the updated plan. So, it's not like we're addressing an action and then submitting it to DWR. They're wrapped into a lot of the actions, the activities that Jean was describing, especially with the modeling committee and the update of the model. She reported on the GDE monitoring. That's one of the things we need to address. So they're wrapped into a number of those items.
Okay, I'm just, I appreciate that it's not a simple answer, but I do want to remind everybody that the 5-year cycle started in 2020 and the next update is due in 2025. Essentially 3 years have passed. So we basically have less than 2 years to go and 19 items to address. So I just want to make sure that they're all being worked on to some extent and that we've got a timetable where we can make sure they're all addressed by the time, January of 2025 that they have to go in. Thank you.
Just a clarification, Director Vittori, you're correct on when we submitted the GSP. We did not receive comments back from DWR until 2022. So
understand that, but the update is still due in 2025.
Correct.
We just have
we
a
know when the
3-year
update is.
cycle this time.
Yeah, we understand that, Director Vittori. We met the last deadline. We'll meet this one.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, are there any comments from the public on the Water Resource Manager's report?
Don Decker, are we on here? I have a question probably for Jean Moran. The water analyses that will be performed on the Rose Valley wells, I assume are going to be with the same schedule that was done with EP1 and includes the rarer but nevertheless essential elements that were included in EP1? That's, I guess, the question for you, Jean.
Yes, and in addition to testing those 2 wells, we plan on testing the wells nearby at the same time so that we get a sense of that whole area.
Are there any members of the public that would still like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none in here, we'll go to the phones. Go ahead, caller.
Hello, this is Renee West-Delusk. I just have a question. on the part shallow well impacts and mitigation, where it's on the slide, 872 wells are estimated to be shallow, and then in parentheses it says includes 832 private domestic wells. What other type of wells are the other 40 of the 872 wells? What type of well would those others be that are not private domestic wells?
Okay.
This is Heather Steele. I can answer that. The other wells.
Just one
would
moment,
be-
Heather.
Yes.
Phil Hall, would you like to?
I can answer it, or I can answer it. I
Okay.
can give you an answer, though, if or would you like to take it, Heather? I mean, we're going to give the same answer. The reality is, private domestic wells include those that would be on a well sharing agreement or one well per home. Okay? The way the system for well permitting in the state of California works is you can have 4 homes on one well and be a private. Once you go beyond that, you get into a system where the law basically no longer wants the well to be owned by somebody because you have more than 5 connections. It goes into a mutual benefit corporation. And so 5 and above, they have to file mutual benefit corporations. It's a little bit different, and it's just an anomaly of the law. For Sigma, it kicks into whether or not you can be de minimis. Because once you get above the 4, then you're a mutual and de minimis is out.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, next caller, please. Okay, not seeing any others. We'll move to item number 16, and that's the general manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first item is the monthly financial report. So in your packet, you do have the financial statements through end of September. And I just want to point out that these are pretty detailed financials. We publish these every month. And as far as we have a budget to actual, which will show our budgeted amount for the year per budget item and per the various funds that the items are allocated to. So it's all broken out. Anyone who's interested can take a look at this every month to see how much was budgeted to be collected, how much was actually collected to date or for the month per fund, per revenue fund. Also can see what expenditures have been made for the month and year to date. And then recognizing that a budget is only for that particular year, the financial statements also include at the end a cash balance report. And the cash balance report shows all the money that we have in the banks. It doesn't, unfortunately, break that out by fund account, but it does show what the ending balance of available cash is that we have invested as of the end of that prior month. So this information is here. It's quite detailed, and I think it's very informative for anyone who's really interested in what our financials look like.
Great.
Let's see. Next item is our report. You have a report in your packet from Capital Corps Group. They've been doing quite a lot for us, working on the water rights acquisition, of course, working on the community drought application package. There's several other items working on federal funding as well. In fact, we had a meeting just yesterday with a representative from the Army Corps of Engineers to talk about the directive that was provided in that Water Resources Development Act. And Jeff, if you or Michael wanted to add anything to that report, you're welcome to do so. Otherwise, they have a nice detailed report in your packet.
No updates from us, Carol.
Okay. And then we have also a brief report on our SDAC, Severely Disadvantaged Communities grant work. And we had reported to you previously that we had hoped to do add to this contract, which was primarily leak detection and that sort of work. We had hoped to add a meter changeout program to it for some of these small systems that really weren't able to meter their systems very well. And we thought that was going to work out, and ultimately we had to cancel that program because the meter vendor required 50% of the cost up front, and Cal Rural Water Association wasn't prepared to do that. Neither was the Groundwater Authority. So because our funds are reimbursed through the state as a grant program. So ultimately, we decided to just go ahead with the leak detection work with some additional small systems out there, and also helping those systems with their water shortage contingency planning. And that work is expected to conclude by the end of this month. Finally, in regard to the communications and engagement plan, I know that there's a detailed report from the PAC. Just want to point out that we're continuing to work on those activities, and I currently am working with staff on some proposals for website updates and enhancements. So we're looking forward to completing that within the next few months. That's my report.
Great to hear. Thank you. Any questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, are there any members of the public that would like to comment on the general manager's report? All right, seeing none, we will go to item number 17, and that is the PAC and TAC reports, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Dave Janis.
There it is. Good afternoon, Board of Directors. You'll recall in the July meeting, we presented you with the PAC report that you had asked us for on how to do communications and engagement during the implementation phase, which we are now in for the GSP. And that included a report itself and a detailed report that gave you a lot of background information beyond it. The tasking for the last 2 months for the PAC meeting have been to review the official C&E plan and make recommended changes to that plan. And in so doing, we took into account 5 things that I want to go through in a little bit of detail here, because it reflects all the things that you're going to see in the plan itself. The plan should be before you as approved, and we'll get to that out of the PAC. My report is, in reviewing this, we went through, as I said, several items. The main one were our PAC recommendations that we provided you back in July. And the key findings, there were 3 major key findings with regards to key focus elements for the GSP implementation phase. Individual PAC member comments, in particular regarding recommended plan changes from our review of 6 other GSPs around the state that were passed, all at varying degrees of maturity of their groundwater authorities when they were established, et cetera. Also, lessons learned from our GSP development phase and our C&E experiences. The 4th item we took into account was DWR observations and recommendations from their GSP approval document, and that included DWR recommended corrective action number 1. So this is addressing DWR recommended corrective action number 1. And the last thing was we went back and reviewed the requirements in SGMA and the state water code required in a C&E plan. So we did a pretty darn comprehensive review of all the things that might be involved in this. And we had a subcommittee do it, and we presented that first in the September meeting. I'm sorry, the August meeting, and then we brought it back with all the comments and inputs. We had 2 written sets of comments, as well as comments from every PAC member. So we brought that back in the September meeting. And again, we had one written comment submission and individual comments from all the members. And we arrived at an agreement that we were going to submit a recommended plan to you. And the big thing about this plan is that the plan that we have now was developed for GSP development. And it only addressed GSP development and then overall communication. This new plan addresses the implementation phase and all the things that we're doing in it. And in particular, within that, I'll go back to that item number 1 of our July recommendations and talk about the things that you see listed under number 1. The key focus elements for the GSP implementation phase, an integrated schedule and key fact sheets. That integrated schedule is going to provide to the public, the way we defined it in that C&E plan, it's going to provide to the public the status of each of the implementation management actions and plans and exactly what their schedule is, where the funding came from, and what their status is. That's going to answer more so than the detailed budgets or even the very general budget, either of which we've seen today. In our mind, that's going to do a great deal more to practically present to the public what is the status and where are the funds being spent, where are we on each of our individual actions, obtaining water, obtaining the imported water, all our management actions. Increased and new methods of communication. We've talked about the internet and the need to get our toe in the water. Specifically, Carol, you mentioned the website to be the central repository of accurate and both accurate detailed and accurate layman's terms information fact sheets. Also, traditional stakeholder targeted meetings, targeted workshops, those types of things, perhaps on individual management actions. The final one under this section was the communication and engagement director function. We felt it was really necessary that we focus the messages and ensure we have enough. Information is so fragmented. The sources of information are so fragmented. There's no one way to get information out to folks. And this topic is very complex, and it takes a well-organized communications strategy, so to speak, for organization of how you present it. And it needs to be presented from the authority's unified voice. And the communications and engagement director, or communications director, I think is what we called them, would be that person. So you have the plan before you. The PAC agreed overall that we would provide that. We took a motion to do that, and the motion passed 7-1. We had one dissent from Judy Decker, and she was going to provide a separate minority report on this. I didn't see the minority report. Judy, did you provide one? Okay, I did not see it, but nonetheless, there is the report that you see from us and the minority report from Judy attached. So that's the summary of what we did with respect to the communication and engagement plan, and it was everyone on the PAC engaged. This was a good, solid effort, and I think we've given you something to take a good, hard look at. And of course, it is your plan, it is the GA's plan to accept or reject what inputs you want to take from and recommendations from our committee. But that's what we recommend you take on board. I'll make one final comment. Don Zadiba had mentioned that at the facilitation outbrief of the stakeholder feedback survey they had from Stantec last week, that the PAC might be tasked to do. The PAC was going to be presented the same presentation, and there might be some tasking coming from this group, from the board of directors, as to what you want, what is the objective that you want the PAC to achieve engaging with the public and Stan taking that presentation. So we're looking forward to that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Janis, and thank you to all the members of the PAC that worked on that. This is a really detailed report, and I think will provide us a really good framework for moving forward with our communication, which we've been hearing repeatedly we need to work on. So thank you guys very much for your input. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I would like to thank the PAC, every one of them. Obviously, a lot of work being done. There's a lot of energy put into it, and there's a lot of people with strong opinions, which is good. And I just want to let you know that it's greatly appreciated, and I would like to see this board pursue whatever our strategy is, the way forward in the near future. I think for those who went to the facilitation meeting, I think it was like last week, one of the things that came out of it was the lack of transparency by, I think multiple groups mentioned that, and I think this would go a long way to answering a lot of the comments that came out of that facilitation debrief. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this?
Yes, Judy Decker again. Since perhaps you didn't get my paper, I'll be brief. There were two. One was a concern and another one was a lot stronger than that. My concern is, of course, hiring a communications director or giving that job to one of your two existing employees will cost additional funds. And you need every penny you can scrape together for imported water. At the rate we're going, it's going to be cheaper to drink champagne. My other comment had to do with the end of the document, and David mentioned a unified communications approach. The document is actually stronger than that, and I felt it violated the free speech rights of all of you people involved in spending your time sitting on this GA board. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you. And I would just ask April if you have that report. I don't know if maybe there wasn't enough time or not, but if you or Carol could forward that to the board members so we have that as well, I would appreciate it. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak on this?
Yes, this is Wes Katzenstein. I worked with David Janis and Gina Truglin as a subcommittee, and I feel very good about the product we provided. We didn't shy away from any possible approach to engage it in public. We recognize that there's a responsibility, also realize on the public themselves to engage once they're aware of the problem, and we want to strike a balance between what the Groundwater Authority needs to do to kind of alert the public or notify the public, but there's also responsibility that lies with the public and the individuals. We want to be sure that we provide the resources for interested members of the public to answer their questions, both, as David mentioned, at the general level and at the detailed level, and that's where the website is so important. And we really took on the tough question of social media. We can't ignore it. It seems to me that it's a very primitive form of communication. I was associating it with like grunts and hand signals. I think it's more than that. But we, based on largely on Regina's inputs, I recognize that social media can be, there may be some high ground in social media when it comes to getting the word out. And maybe we don't want initially to get in give and take of comments, but when the people start, we start seeing comments ebbing and flowing. But let's use social media as a high ground in getting the word out. And also the social media provides us an opportunity to monitor the dialogue that's going on out there. So when we did the original C&E plan, we didn't know what in the world we were dealing with. It's kind of like the dirty end of the stick, and let's get something out. Now, as David pointed out, we've learned a lot. We've seen limitations. There's been a lot of criticism on the board, a lot of it not justified. And we tried to pull together something which kind of is complete and can be useful, I believe, as we move forward. So, my comments.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to comment on the PAC and TAC reports? Okay, seeing none, and having no more items to consider, we will adjourn to Wednesday, November 9th, 2022.